Welcome to the Superpowers for Good show. I'm your host, Devin Thorpe. Today's guest, Steve Fambro, is the co-CEO and founder of Aptera, a startup that will produce hyper-efficient EVs powered by the sun. He will also share insights about his superpower, depriving himself of comforts as long as required to finish the job. Steve, I couldn't be more thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much for making time for us. I see you're building my car right in back of you.
Yes, got your name right on it.
No, that's one of your beta models, isn't it? That you're building right behind us?
This is an alpha. This is one of the three alphas.
Oh, one of the three alphas. Okay.
Yep.
So let's take a step back for the sake of the audience. Tell us about the vision for what the Aptera will be.
Aptera is about using the least amount of energy to go from point A to point B. And when you start thinking about that, especially as an engineer, you go down a path that invariably leads you to something that would look like an Aptera. There's no other way to do it. And so being an electrical engineer, a former electrical engineer myself, a recovering electrical engineer, however you think of it, we are given to just think about efficiency in everything. And that's something that even from my very first job as a teenager at McDonald's, you begin thinking about efficiency. You're making 1,000 hamburgers, not one hamburger. And so your economy of movement and things like this, it's something that lends itself into engineering. So yeah, the Aptera is always going to be about efficiency, using the least amount of energy to do the same job as anybody else.
Yeah, it's probably too soon for you to have done it, but eventually, what the NTSB or somebody in the government is going to give you an MPG equivalent or an EMPG rating on your car. It seems to me, if I'm doing my math right, it's going to be in the range of 200 or 300 miles per gallon equivalent. Is that what you're thinking?
Yes, I believe.
I mean, that's a shocking number. I mean, the best Tesla is barely over 100, right? So it's 2x plus what a Tesla would be, right?
Yeah, I don't know right now the MPG equivalent or MPGE, which I guess E is equivalent, is because we focus on watt hours per mile. Mm-hmm. But our target is 100 watt hours per mile, and we've hit that before, and so it's not like that's a big stretch for us. It's about how do we do it at the cost and delivery and timeline and all that kind of thing. But for us to make the magic work, we have to hit 100 watt hours per mile, and it's been very difficult to do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are there, but that's where all the engineering occurs, is to make a vehicle that's lightweight, that's strong enough, and can still hit those numbers. But that's our number.
It is a great focus. I think my Bolt, and I'm a bit of not an extreme hypermiler, but a bit of a hypermiler, always tracking my miles. And I'm in the range of 240 watt hours per mile. And so I think about that 100 and just think, that's nothing. It's just nothing. It's no juice. And so I ordered my Aptera with the 600-mile range, the 60 kilowatt hour battery. And I can't imagine. I mean, it's a whole day drive without charging. I mean, it's just an amazing vehicle. Let's get a little bit granular. I know you're excited about the engineering. Tell us a little bit about some of the specifics that make the Aptera work. There's special surface. You got the solar panels. You got the three-wheeledness. Tell us, brag a little bit about how this all comes together.
Well, the first thing that people notice when they see an Aptera is the shape. Why does it look that way? And it was the answer to a question that we asked quite a long time ago. Well, what is the lowest drag shape that can surround two people side by side? what is the mathematics of that shape? Surely it must be expressible, and so that's how we discovered the cambered body. So part of the magic that goes into it to make it that efficient is the low aerodynamic drag. We have the drag profile, the drag product, the CDA of this about the same amount as the Ford F-150 side mirror, just as a comparison. That's a big flat object sticking out in the wind, and it creates a lot of turbulence and drag, which is about the same amount as our total vehicle. So
That's
it's
wild.
orders of magnitude less. Yeah, that's why. I mean, I still say wow when I look at some of this stuff. Orders of magnitude less. The next is the weight. Weight. Once you take away first order losses and drop them down, now all the second order losses are almost as high, and so now you have to attend to those. And one of those are rolling resistance. So that is determined by tire selection. That's determined by the kind of bearings and the kind of seals on the motor, and the weight. Weight is a big factor of rolling losses. So attending to the weight means that we have to use non-traditional materials, composites, some expensive things like that we're making more cost effective. So aerodynamics and lightweight are the biggest part of that. The plus 30, 40 miles per day that comes from the solar is icing on the cake. That's something that we think really makes people's head explode, because most people don't drive 40 miles a day. They drive 15, 20, 25, 30. And even like myself, I've got a Bolt like you, and it's out front being charged right now. I don't need to charge it to get home, but I like, having half to three quarters of a charge most of the time. But you feel a little bit almost how maybe an addict would feel, running around looking for the next hit, making sure you have enough. And the Bolt is a good vehicle. You're not stranded going to the airport or something like that, but you're always, you have it in the back of your mind. And so how do we take that off the table for people so they don't even have to worry about it? And that was the idea of Never Charge, of just the vehicle charging itself while parked in the sun. So I think those three things, the low drag, the lightweight, and the integrated solar that's integrated with the structural panels, it's replaceable, but it's added on top of them, so it's part of it. Long service life for those things, very efficient. And those are the three parts of the equation to give it that magic.
Wow, it is magic, and I just can't wait. It seems to me, from what I've read and seen, that the spacey design is strictly a result of this demand for aerodynamics, for efficiency, right? But it looks kind of like something, right, that George Jetson would drive if he were forced to drive a car, right? You're old enough, I think, to get that reference, perhaps. But
Right.
Tell us a little bit about the design, the appearance of the car.
Well, the pure mathematical shape, if you see some of the images from 2006 or so of the very first one, the Mark One, it was a very pure shape. It's kind of this series of infinitely thin ellipses, and that makes a cambered body and gives the occupants the space. And it was very easy mathematically to determine and integrate, differentiate. But that's not a shape that gives you a lot of headroom, and it's also not a shape that is fun to be in. And so we had to work with a real car designer. And that's just when we met Jason Hill some time ago. And so we kind of gave him carte blanche and said, look, do whatever you want to the shape, just don't increase the drag. If you make it more usable, if you make it look more appealing, but the drag doesn't go up, then go for it. And so everything that he's done, everything that our engineers do that change the surface, anything that interacts with the air, has to go through that lens or that filter of, does it increase the drag or not? And if it does, they have to come and talk to me and Chris, and we have to, justify their existence or why doing that. But they don't really do that because people know that we're not in the business of adding drag to the vehicle. We're trying to take it away. But so the shape is mathematics, but it's also design. It's where Jason came in, and taking that shape and doing what designers do. I'm not a designer. I can't. I recognize and can appreciate good design, but they do something special. They think about shapes and lines and curves in different ways than regular humans, and they're able to transform everyday objects into something that's beautiful.
And it is truly a beautiful car. I'm excited to see the beta models when they're done. I understand they'll be a little different, just a tweak here and there from the alpha models you've built.
A nip and a tuck, um, more headroom, better visibility from the inside. Trying to get the occupants a little closer together. Push the B pillar or the cant rail a little bit away from the head. So I think it's going to give you a greater feeling of space inside, and better visibility, in the A-pillar area.
Yeah.
All will be perceived as improvements, and they will be improvements.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Now, you've been at this for a while, and it hasn't been lower left, upper right in a straight line. There have been some challenges along the way, including at one point bankruptcy. Tell us a little bit about the challenges, how we get here, and why you're confident in the future.
Well, Chris and I started the company originally back in 2006. And within a year or so, we had raised a bit of money, I think about $40 million or so. We hired a professional team of managers, automotive personnel, CEO, and other C-level executives to give us the experience and gravitas necessary to get the Department of Energy loan. And about a year into that plan, we just had a very strong sense of misalignment, myself and Chris, with the professional team. And that misalignment resulted in our departure from the company. And so I went off into farming and developed a vertical farming company. Later, that took me to the Middle East, where I lived with my family for a couple of years. And Chris started a battery company, Flux Power, and took that company public on the NASDAQ, I think, last year. And we got together when I moved back to the United States and said, the Aptera with new batteries would go maybe up to 1,000 miles if we could pack 100 kilowatts, kilowatt hours in. And we just started thinking through and talking about it. And we came to the conclusion that, 2006, 7, 8, when we were first doing it, that was a learning experience. That was a warm up. The market wasn't proven. There was no supply base. You couldn't even buy connectors. Didn't exist for plugs. Everything was bespoke, and you needed lots more capital because of that. And so that's why Tesla was able to succeed then, because they did raise a lot more money at the time, and they made significant inroads into the design of those things, became vertically integrated because those things simply didn't exist. But for us, it's easier because the market's there. People want electric vehicles. You're not forcing them down their throat. The market wants them. There's a supply base. The government wants them. It's just a win-win all the way across. What happened in the past, when we left the company in 2009, like I said, Chris, he started a battery company. I became a farmer for quite a while, vegetables and herbs and things like that. And I developed supply chains in Hong Kong and Singapore and sold our produce there, and just got into a completely new industry because it was new and different and fun. And after that time, the professional team at Aptera at the time, they just ran the company out of money. They were unable to raise money, and they had to liquidate everything and give whatever was left back to the investors. But we were out of the picture for a couple of years at that point. So That's the synopsis of what happened.
Yeah. Well, you're on to great things. And one of the little signs of the success, the energy, the change in the market dynamic, I think, is the recent episode you did with Jay Leno on his show. Um, that isn't how I was introduced to you, but I was thrilled to see that. Tell us a little bit about that and what it signals about the market readiness that Jay Leno is sharing this with his millions of viewers and his audience.
Well, that's interesting. I would say before I answer that, I would say before we got to that point, um, we had built a business plan, Chris and I, for the new Aptera, to build and sell 3,000 to 4,000 vehicles per year. And we said, let's just get into production. We can get our sea legs. We could go and get different financing later. We could decide if we want to IPO, we do this and that. Let's just get in production. And literally before we could even realize it, we had exceeded the 3,000 reservations, like the first month or so. And then it was 4,000, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000. The first couple of days, we had an alert on our phone whenever we get a new pre-order. And it was dinging all the time. And finally we just turned that feature off because it was paradoxically, intriguing and amazing, but also annoying.
Yeah.
To be alerted every time. But we were unprepared for the growth or unprepared for the acceptance. And what it told us is that we tapped into something much bigger than us, much bigger than the company. There's something that's out there that we've tapped into that people want. And so we have had that validated by lots of means that we can discuss publicly like this, and other means that we can't discuss publicly. And so for Jay Leno, for that show to happen again, and for us to be on there, it was a feeling of humility and just it's to recognize how precious it is to get a second chance. You don't get second chances, and the things have aligned in our lives to give us a second chance, and that just doesn't really happen. And so we're onto something very special, and that was maybe a moment where I think I realized that for the first time. This is so much bigger than what we anticipated. Things have aligned in a way that we could not have ever imagined to put us here. And so it's our duty to do our very best to make this happen. And that's what everybody here is doing.
Yeah. It is an exciting time to be in this space. And as one of your reservation holders, I think I think my next question is the question we all have, and that is, when will you start making the cars, and how do you get there? There's so much to do between building, 10 or 12 beta cars, which is the step you're on now, and building 10,000, 20,000 cars a year. How do you get there?
It's a lot of stuff. There are things in the schedule that we have very crisp control over. And there's things in the schedule that visibility, we're working to make sure we have 100% visibility, supply chain issues, things like this. And so that's really a way to look at it. What is in your control? What is not in your control? And so the elements that are within our control, we're doing everything that we can to bring them to bear so that we can begin producing cars next year. Vehicles next year, not cars. There's some of the long lead things. Calibration of the airbags, for example. That's a long process. It has to start, January, February next year to make that viable. And then lots of things have to happen so that can happen. That's just one example, but it's it really comes down to, Gantt charts, timing diagrams, making sure things are accounted for and things are assigned to people. Sometimes we can't hire the people fast enough, and we have to work with industry partners who can come in and take chunks of the vehicle and help us with the development. For example, we work with Roush, who has modeled our suspension, our new suspension for beta. They've redesigned it, I should say, not modeled it, redesigned it, making it, I would say, handle as any modern road car would handle, with rebound and jounce and being able to pass the moose test and all of these kinds of things, and validating that in software and simulation before we even drive the first beta. Very cool. But that's part of the kinds of things that we had to do to help us get to the schedule, get to where we need to be on the timeline, is to, recognize what we need. And if we can't get it, then we go and work with a partner like Roush. We let them do that development with us, and they put 10 people on the program, and that helps the suspension segment go through. Same with the doors and other things like that. So, long lead things, getting a handle on those, starting some of those things for production as early as January, February next year, just so we can hit our timeline.
Yeah.
Lots of moving parts.
When do you hope to deliver the first Aptera to a customer?
Next year. I can't be pinned down on a month right now. We were just talking about that in the conference room back there. So we have some dates, I think, that we're going to start circulating maybe, but we have to have buy off internally that that's acceptable, that's possible. Yeah. But I definitely next year, for sure next year. When, I'm not going to pin the company down publicly without having the buy-in from the team yet.
Yeah. Well, this is quite a thing. And, it's, I think, a profound insight that you appreciate that these second chances are rare and special. It's hard for me to think of many where I've seen people go through what you did and be able to come back and try again at the same thing. It really is a rare thing. What do you think of as your superpower?
Oh, my superpower. They told me you were going to ask this. I think it's, my wife would say it's my ability to close my eyes and sleep anywhere. But I learned that from the Army. But I would say something else I also learned from the Army is the ability to deprive myself of any comfort or sleep or food or whatever is needed for as long as needed, and without experiencing discomfort. So if I need to work over the weekend and hardly sleep or eat or do something like that, or travel somewhere and not eat and not worry about it, it's not something that causes me any concern. If it's heat, if it's working with my construction crew in 120 degrees Fahrenheit desert, because they don't have air conditioning either, and so we're all working there, and whatever deprivation I need to have, it's just not an issue for me.
Well, that's really interesting. As you look at Aptera, how many times have you had to engage? Is that something you've done pretty regularly? Is to deploy that superpower of sacrifice to do that, or is that just something from the farming days?
No, I did a lot earlier. I do have two small children, so I have not small, 15-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old boy. And I do try and arrange my schedule so that I see as much of them as I can. But certainly early on in the formation of the company and in the previous company, I use that a lot. But today even, it's how I am able to work in the evening or the weekends or things like that, or when I need to get more done than I would just being in the office, or if I have to travel and work and do something like that. So I don't let any discomfort, just be a factor in my performance, I should say. Guess that's
Oh,
the way of describing it.
fantastic. Obviously, you alluded to your training in the military, and some of that training, I think, is specific to that sort of skill, right? I wonder if you were teaching an entrepreneur or someone who wanted to have the kind of impact you're having to learn that self-discipline, that self-deprivation as a skill that could be leveraged for good. What would you teach them? How would you teach them to do that?
Mm. I would first have to resist the urge to, oh, it's moving.
Yeah, it
Where are
works.
you going? Where are they taking my car? I would have to resist the urge to lecture them about Stoic philosophy. And so I'd say that's probably where I learned a lot of it too, not just the deprivations that you have in the military, but um, the deprivation, even practices that come from Stoicism, little exercises in self-denial. It's a constant thing, and in a modern hedonistic society, it's hard to do that. You become adapted. When I worked in the Middle East, when I worked for the royal family, they would fly me around to review different ag tech deals all over the world, essentially. And it was always in business and first class. And that's when I discovered hedonic adaption. So you become accustomed to that as your baseline level. And for some reason, the first time, like, you have to fly coach or an economy after that, and you find yourself complaining with this or that, and it was really the first time I caught myself doing that, and it was a touch point to say, wait a minute, watch for that behavior, because you become accustomed to these luxuries and these things, and they're not essential, and they're not normal even. And I think it's important to think about those things like that. As most of the world doesn't have hot and cold running water. I mean, the evolved economies do, but evolved economies are not most of the world.
Yeah.
So having a dry place to go, a warm place to go, hot and cold running water, enough food so that you could eat and become unhealthy. Like, these are all this sort of positive feedback of hedonism that I think require periodic self-deprivation to keep yourself from just wanting more.
Well, that's a powerful insight. I really appreciate that, Steve. Well, Steve, I know you're busy and want to respect your time. I can't thank you enough for doing this today.
My pleasure.
Before you go, would you take just a minute and tell people how they can learn more about Aptera, how they can order one, how they can follow you on social media, perhaps, and learn more? I mean, just whatever you want to encourage people to do, take a minute and encourage them.
Easiest way is to go to aptera.us. From there, you can see our Instagram links, Twitter links, everything else. You're not going to see me dancing on TikTok yet, but I'm sure it's being discussed. No, I'm just kidding. Nobody wants to see that. But aptera.us is a way to reserve a vehicle, to invest. We have a current round of funding that's open right now. And it's also a way to connect on social media and subscribe to those things. And you'll see the updates as they occur, which is great, because Sarah and the marketing team are putting out really good contact and or really good materials, excuse me. And that's something that we didn't have before, that is also part of the equation that's really driving the interest, is just the quality of the work that the marketing team is doing.
Oh, fantastic. Well, again, Steve, congratulations on the progress so far. We wish you every success, and I have a selfish interest, so I'm hoping those cars start rolling out of the factory soon, but good luck to you, okay?
Yeah.
All righty. Let's do some good. Thank you for tuning in to the Superpowers for Good show, twice each week. We host changemakers who share their impact, insights, and superpowers. Don't miss another episode. Subscribe today at superpowersforgood.com. That's superpowers, 4, good.com. Be super empowered. Get your copy of the book, Superpowers for Good, as an ebook, audiobook, paperback, or hardcover edition via your favorite online retailer. Interested in having me speak to your company, organization, or association? Visit devonthorpe.com. Then let's talk. Now, keep using your superpowers for good. Together, we can reverse climate change, improve global health, and eradicate poverty.